Hi and welcome to episode 15 of The Party Line. This podcast is recorded on Indigenous land and we stand in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters in their struggles against racism and capitalism.
Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling party line. Oh, I never will forsake thee, for I love this life of mine.
Hey, it's Annika.
Geordie.
And Omar.
You usually go second. I was waiting.
Yeah, but sometimes
Like
people
to
like to
change
sit at the back of the bus, you know?
Yeah, it's
Oh, like an outcaster.
Or the cool part.
The cool part.
Cool part of the bus.
sure.
What have you guys been up to this week?
It's been Christmas.
It has been.
Christmas.
I've had 2 Christmases.
I had 3. No, 4.
Well, that's greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too
Have
many.
you thought about the starving kids in Africa? They don't even get one, probably.
Don't they know it's Christmas?
Yeah. So I had a funny Christmas. My favorite incident was some comments made about masculinity.
Oh,
Nice.
yours or?
No, not mine. I think mine's unquestioned. It's the masculinity of my 18-month-old baby,
Oh,
who
Awesome.
apparently just isn't quite making the cut. You know, his biceps are not sufficiently defined. His hair is a little bit long.
a little bit long hair.
The
He should
colours,
workshop that.
He
I
wasn't
reckon.
wearing the right colours.
Yeah. Did he have a bit of pink on?
Yeah, so that got a bit of commentary. But apart from that, it was great.
Did you
Very
stand
relaxing.
up for him?
I wasn't there at the time.
Oh,
I would have.
you
I'm
would
a
have?
big believer in,
Is what would you have said?
Yeah,
like,
well,
he's
yeah.
a real man.
It's actually salmon.
yeah. Anyway, I wasn't there, so that just went through to the keeper. I think.
Okay, yeah. Pawned it down.
How was Boxing Day, Annika?
Oh my God, it was crazy. You know who we saw at the cricket?
A bunch of like,
You went to the
Right,
cricket?
wing
Yeah, I went,
fascists.
I
Oh,
go to
no
Boxing
way.
Day. Andrew Giles. He was walking past, but we didn't say anything to him. Shame.
Alas.
It was too late by the time he was there. But yeah, crazy. First time, I think, since the 30s or the 40s that 20 wickets were dropped on one
Yeah.
day.
fascinating.
It's actually crazy, though. That's like T20 stuff.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because like all of the commentators and like all of the media or whatever talking about it, like this is a tragedy, like this is so terrible. But it's like they're not upset because like the game was uninteresting. It was very interesting. They're like, Cricket Australia has lost $10 million
Yeah.
and the advertisers and all
Yeah.
like, so they're just worried about losing money, not like those of us at the cricket having a good time. So
Yeah. I haven't been into cricket since I was about 11 years old.
yeah.
After I broke my parents' window for about the 40th time with a beautiful pull shot. I haven't watched it or played it. Yeah.
That sounds like it's for the best. Probably good move. Did you see the guns?
Oh
I
my
heard there were
God,
guns.
yes. They had
Oh.
the cops, they had these huge fuck
Yeah.
off guns. And it's so scary, like to know
Yeah.
that there's just these cops that presumably don't really ever fire, like they don't really fire these big guns. Do they know real gun? Like, I just feel, you know.
Yeah. Was it the port? Or was it someone else? Which cops?
I don't know. They were wearing dark blue.
It'll be
It's
poor.
You-
Port, yeah.
Uniforms,
Like
yeah.
the fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But yeah, they were like just walking around the like concourse with these huge fuck off guns.
And you just get this real feeling of safety when
Yeah.
you see these big burly men
Yeah.
with massive machine guns. It just like warms the heart. Like nothing could go wrong.
And then also, you know, just the classic thing of paying like huge amounts of money for a beer, which would have cost like $12 anywhere else, but costs like $17 at the cricket ground. So
Yeah.
I mean, $12 is a rip-off even as it stands.
Yeah. My bullshit story from Christmas is that I guess all I will say is the quiet Australians that John Howard spoke about are not very quiet.
By the way, guys, that was a peek behind the curtain. We actually call this segment the bullshit segment every week.
Yeah.
So good work for
that's
outing
the
us on that.
headline bullshit.
The other bullshit thing I saw was skinny jeans are back.
Oh.
Damn
Yeah.
right.
Geordie's wearing them. If you want to see on the YouTube channel, he's got the tight one. What do you mean?
They're actually chinos.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by skinny jeans?
So this stupid article, I mean, the media at the moment is just unreadable. It's all absolute garbage. But this one thing was like 9 pop culture predictions for 2026. And the bottom one was skinny jeans are back.
Yeah, but this is an insight into like you don't think about sexism enough. Because this is actually a story about the way that thinness is back in women. And it's like,
Oh, yeah,
it's
definitely.
being like the skinny jeans trend is because Ozempic and like we're thinking of doing an episode on women's oppression coming up, and one of the things I was reading about was a new surgery that has become in vogue. First, it was buccal fat removal, so literally taking the fat out of women's cheeks. Now it's lower rib removal.
Yeah.
Jesus
is
Christ.
the thing that is coming in. So the skinny jeans being back is like an insight into women's oppression is just expanding.
To be fair, like heroin chic existed well before skinny jeans. But I will take that.
I think they were wearing the skinny
No,
jeans.
not in
They
the
were.
early 90s.
Yeah, they were.
No, it
I
wasn't
see,
skinny.
and I feel like another insight into women's oppression is that I just assumed it was skinny jeans were back for men.
No, and not just skinny. This is the thing, not just skinny jeans, but the low riding ones, which are obviously so uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, terrible.
And like the article just made a joke about
Yeah.
the bum bone, issue.
Bum
Like
bone.
What?
you know how like when you, well, I haven't worn them, but like when you see people wearing them, as soon as you do anything, bend over, sit down,
Yeah.
You see the bum crack.
because it's so low that like
Yeah.
they're just impossible to wear. Obviously,
Did you say bum bone because you didn't want to say bum crack? Or
well, the article actually said tailbone, so I
Oh.
sort of did a fusion.
okay.
Nice.
Anyway, so yeah, skinny jeans are back. I actually had a pair till quite recently that I've owned since 2000.
Mhm, so you can bring them back into
Yeah, and I got
rotation.
rid of it. I finally, I pretty much have a number of clothes that exist from the 90s that I have owned consistently and
Yeah.
worn consistently since then.
Yeah.
And I'm quite proud of that. It's like my
Yeah.
statement against fast fashion.
Who made? Like, we should look up who made them. That's
It was actually JJ's, which I think is
Oh.
fast fashion, or
Yeah, it
was
is,
if they still
definitely.
exist.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
No,
anyway,
they still exist.
they're
Yeah.
cotton tees from the 90s.
You can
lasted
still
a long
get
time.
Damn.
terrible graphic tees from JJ's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this episode is probably going to be a lot more kind of serious than some of the ones that we've put out recently. I mean, the Christmas episode, I think we
That was
said
pretty serious.
It was all nonsense. But later on in the episode, we're going to have Amy Remeikis on to talk about, what we want to talk about in the whole episode is the political response to the Bondi massacre. We did an episode last week, 2 weeks ago, sort of discussing the immediate fallout. But since then, there's been new laws introduced into the New South Wales Parliament, and the media have just been running article after article after article attacking the Palestine movement and the like. So Amy is going to come on later on the app to talk specifically about the media. But yeah, I mean, it's just been pretty mental.
It's been insane. Yeah. Like, I don't even know where to start. Like, pick something. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, just the tirade of crap in the media, especially
Yeah.
the Australian. The Australians, like, it's Christmas. Bondi was its Christmas present, I think. It's not. It's not a stretch to say. They are just gleefully commenting every day about what Bondi says about Australia, why it proves that fascism has always been right, multiculturalism is the devil, Muslims and migrants need to be curbed, gotten rid of. So that's one thing. The other thing is like the Labor Party has come under really, we talked about the attacks last time, but it's accelerated. Like there's this letter from a part of the Labor Party, obviously a very pro-Israel part, accusing the whole organisation of being rife with anti-Semitism, which we'll talk about. Basically, the idea is unless you are totally sworn fealty to Israel, you are in danger in this climate. And so I think it's time to step back and take a bit more of a critical look at what's been going on.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Chris Minns obviously is Labor Party, but he's been very on the front foot in terms of using this as a political moment to attack the Palestine movement, push back on civil liberties. And some of the language that he's used has just been pretty incredible. In one press conference that he did, they were sort of asking him about like, well, what about banning the protests? Like, is this going to be a problem? And he said that if the protests happen, it adds to the slippery slope of inflammatory rhetoric that ends up scaling up the more it occurs. So the more protests there are, the more slippery slope inflammatory rhetoric. And then he literally said, when they protest, you're letting demons out of the jug and it's very difficult to put them back in. Like demons?
Yeah.
Like pro-Palestine, anti-genocide marches are demons in the eyes of Chris Minns.
It's insane. Like, that's just insanity. Like, I think about who might have said that, like, throughout history, and it's like hard. It's hard to think about.
And the sort of like the government in New South Wales have said and done a lot of crazy things in the last couple of weeks, including talk about how they're thinking of giving a group called the Community Security Group.
Yeah.
Community Security Group weapons. So this is a like Jewish organization that runs private security for events, literally saying they want to give guns to a private militia.
Religious militia. Yeah, they want to create a religious militia in response to this.
Yeah,
Which is insane.
You can just imagine if Muslims had decided to create a
Totally.
religious self-defense militia
Yeah.
in the aftermath
Would
of
Minns be
Christchurch.
harming them?
Yeah.
Minns would not be doing that.
And would the Australian be campaigning for it? The other thing they're running this sort of constant anti-immigration, multicultural sort of line, and this was just like such a blast from the past. One headline said, "Australia faces a clash of civilizations it cannot ignore." Which, I mean, for those who grew up, millennials in the Howard years, you'll remember that rhetoric. Huntington, John Lewis, I think his name was, all these racist neocon academics. But in this article, look what it says. It says, the two Islamists at Bondi were shooting at worshipping Jews, at police, at anyone in sight. Indeed, the whole social order and its cultural fabric at Advance Australia Fair. These cannot be passed off as the psychotic acts of a lone, mentally disturbed madman, as was the Port Arthur massacre. Free Palestine demonstrations massing every weekend, some diverting through Jewish suburbs to intimidate locals, have prepared the way for this outcome. I mean, extreme stuff, absolute lies. I mean, I'm pretty sure the protest about the Jewish suburb thing was because a Palestinian man had his shop burnt down and his shop happened to be in a Jewish suburb. There was no indication that Jews were involved in either way. It was nothing about Jews. It was just the bloody shop was there. So this is just absolute slander, and this has just become normalised, And in the same article, it says, we are opposite to monocultural Japan, which has preserved its ethnic and cultural purity, helping make its cities today clean, orderly, and smoothly running. I mean, the association here is ethnic and cultural purity with clean, orderly, and smooth running cities.
Yeah. So it's dirty. It's dirty to be multicultural.
But it's like, it's literally promoting, like you said, it's fascistic. Like the Australian newspaper is just a pro-fascist newspaper at this point. And they've been happily parroting the lines of the likes of Bob Catter and Pauline Hanson, who have been calling for, the assimilation of Muslims. And like we talked about the other week, the idea that all of these, ethnic values that are coming in to blame. I think it might have been in that article that we just sort of talked about, or maybe another one that they ran. But it was arguing that there needs to be more basically Islamophobic laws introduced in order to curb, to stop things like this gun attack happening, including like just random stuff about like curtailing the capacity for people to do religious practices, like, marriages or wearing a burqa or like... I don't think the gunmen were wearing burqas. Like this is, the conflation of, Muslim people, Arab people with this action. This is where they want to drive and push everything. And it's just, there was already that man from Sydney who has been arrested because he called for a Cronulla 2.0 in response.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's just interesting seeing the response to this and comparing it to the response to the one in New Zealand,
Christchurch.
Yeah, like it's just completely different. And it's like, why?
Well, no one ever says like when a white man does some shooting, no one ever says, well, all white people have to look
suffer
inside themselves, to suffer. White cultures, we got to delete cricket from the national cultural landscape, as sad as that would be. Like, it's always on the oppressed and minority groups who are forced to sort of account for every act of someone who happens to be of their own. I mean, so we're going to break down all this shit, and I think we should start with Jillian Segal because she's one of the key protagonists in the aftermath and in the whole discussion about anti-Semitism in Australia. And it's worth saying, I mean, it's probably obvious to our listeners, Segal is not some objective commentator. No. She's not a neutral observer. She is an absolute pro-Israel hack. So in 2023, in August, when the Albanese government decided to refer to the West Bank as occupied and as Israeli settlements as illegal, which is absolutely true and in line with international law, Segal said that these actions were inaccurate, ahistorical, and counterproductive. So basically, her position is that illegal settlements and Israeli occupation of West Bank and Gaza are good and just. In November 23, so after the war began, the genocide, she said it was libel to call the bombing of hospitals war crimes.
Oh my God.
It would never happen.
It's libel.
It's libel.
Yeah.
And this was part of the whole thing of like the Palestinians bombed their own hospitals, if listeners remember.
Yeah. And it was, the idea that anyways, I'm stumbling over my words, but I just think like it became obvious time and time again that Israel are very happy to bomb not only hospitals, but schools, UN centers, food distribution sites, the idea that it's libel. I mean, it's the conflation with what is happening in Gaza with Judaism. They want to do this. They want to bring these two things together. And then they accuse people who are trying to fight against a genocide for standing up for, for ordinary human people. They've laid the basis they've set up the context for a massacre. Omar shared into our WhatsApp chat that we use a screenshot from an Australian piece, which it sort of says like, we must fight back against hate speech. Oh, it was a Herald Sun piece, sorry. We must fight back against hate speech. And then the photo that they've used is from a protest in Melbourne where people literally just have signs that say March for Humanity.
Yeah.
March for justice, march for dignity.
Hate speech.
That's hate
Disgusting.
speech.
Yeah. What they should have said is march for Israel. March for genocide. March for killing 20,000 children. And that would have been absolutely democratic. But I mean, Jillian Segal, I did some research on her because, she's a white South African and that, I'm sorry, Geordie, it immediately makes you suspicious.
Totally.
And you have to prove,
Rightfully so.
Yeah, and you have to prove as a white South African that you're not a just racist far-right freak. And Geordie has clearly proven that.
Job, Geordie.
Segal has
Jeez.
not proven that,
Yeah.
Her family trust has been funding Advance Australia, which is a far-right super PAC sort of equivalent in the Australian context.
Like a racist organization, like a racist, anti-immigrant, Jewish as well. They've done anti-Semitic ads in the past. Wild.
Exactly. And when you look into her dad was actually an executive of diamond and coal mining companies in South Africa during apartheid. Coal miners, gold miners, diamond miners. This is extremely dangerous, highly exploitative work. I found an article which said that 10% of all mining workers in apartheid South Africa died every year.
It's insane. Like, it's absolute.
A 10% death toll. And her dad was the executive of all this.
Yeah.
And then he comes to Australia in 1960. And the narrative in all the puff pieces is that they left after Sharpeville. Maybe that's true. But as a miner, he would have seen many massacres and tragedies of his workers and obviously overseen that happily. Yeah. So he comes over here and he becomes a gold mining executive in Australia, which, we know mining executives in Australia really principled progressive folk.
Down to earth. Yeah,
down to earth. So, this is a family that's steeped in extreme exploitation, racism, and right-wing politics. And so her plan is marked by all of that.
Yeah. Something to do with, white South Africans whose parents are, I don't know, gold miners or whatever during apartheid South Africa. They're always really good people.
Any other examples you can think of?
Elon Musk.
Oh, wow.
I thought he had emeralds.
Yeah, same thing.
Not gold.
It's like mining.
They didn't use children in the emerald mine.
That's fine.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the plan. So, Tom Tanuki wrote a pretty good article for Independent Australia unpacking the plan. And basically, there was a Executive Council of Australian Jury, ECAJ report from last year, where they came up with a wish list of what they wanted implemented to combat anti-Semitism, by which they meant to combat the pro-Palestine movement. And all 15 points he documents really clearly were implemented in Segal's
Yeah.
anti-Semitism plan. So this is a plan that is literally a copy and paste from the wish list of some of the most extreme right, pro-Israel hacks, in the country. And ECAD, for those who don't know, is like it's sort of on the right wing of the Jewish community kind of representation groups. Segal was the head of it previously, and so this is presented as like the manifestation of a desire to combat anti-Semitism, but it's actually a pro-Israel lobby wish list. Yeah.
Yeah, when you go through it, just the sort of line by line kind of account of what they called for and what they got. So a joint counter-terrorism task force. The envoy have said that they should set up a standing joint task force. Particular understanding of what anti-Semitism is, training. Yes, there's going to be training, regulatory bodies, etc. And then also the stuff about the anti-Semitism and particular definitions of it in schools. So, yeah, it just, and then you go through it all. It's just line by line, basically.
Totally.
It's just, they put it through ChatGPT and said,
Totally.
change this to make it so you can't just say it's copy paste.
Exactly. It's like the meme. Like the way Tom lays it out, it's like the meme that's like change a couple of the words so it looks like you wrote it.
Yeah.
Like far out.
Yeah. And so it's good to see 9 Jewish groups supported by over 20 other organizations, including Amnesty International, the Human Rights Law Centre, have said that Segal's plan risks undermining Australian democratic freedoms and will not combat anti-Semitism. It's undemocratic, it's punitive in nature, it exacerbates instead of combating anti-Semitism. And so as a result of that and the broader pushback, the whole thing was shelved, but now obviously it's come
back on the menu.
And it's a very political decision to bring it back in this moment, and very calculated, because they're calculating that the Labor Party will feel under pressure and will bend to their wishes. And that's not the only source of pressure, the victims themselves. I don't know if people have seen, the victims of the Bondi attack, the families have put out a letter this morning into the mainstream media, a letter to Albanese, echoing these same themes. And I just want to read a section of it because it does all the same rubbish that Jillian Segal does. It says, "As proud Australians and proud Jews, we have endured more than 2.5 years of relentless attacks. Our children feel unsafe at school and university. Sidebar, there has not been a single documented anti-Semitic attack on a Jewish person at school or university. Our homes, workplaces, sporting fields and public spaces no longer feel secure." By which they mean they see people at work wearing pro-Palestine badges, kafirs. On sporting fields, there's been actions in support of Palestine.
Yeah.
Public spaces, there's been protests. So this is, again, the cynical conflation of a tragedy with peaceful anti-war protests. And it's disgusting.
And the thing that none of these right-wing figures, the media, can point to is how the restricting of democratic rights, freedoms, civil liberties would stop something like the Bondi massacre happening. They don't even bother really to make an argument for it. There's not even really here, follow the logic with us, other than they support Palestine, therefore they support the murdering of Jewish people. They don't bother to make the political argument because it's so baked into the Australian political sort of state of mind, basically. And we'll talk about it later with Amy. But this sort of the using of a particular moment in order to push the envelope to, push the Overton window or whatever, to grab as much as you can, and then really just sort of change the setup of the playing board or whatever, to use a million different metaphors in one sentence. But it's they really want to kind of change, the framework that we exist in right now in terms of when can you protest, what can you say, the banning of particular words.
Yeah.
We're literally at a moment right now where the words globalize and intifada cannot be said in the same sentence.
Yeah.
In New South Wales, right?
Yeah. But you're so right. No one's ever tried to make the argument that any of these demands would, prevent what happened from occurring. It's more the argument is we've been demanding, a curtailing of pro-Palestine and anti-Israel actions and speech for 2.5 years, and now we have an excuse to make you do that. That's it. That's the demand. That's the argument, the entire argument.
Yeah, totally.
And the tragedy is so, like, Segal's weaponizing the tragedy, and then this letter by these families is also weaponizing the tragedy because, like, they have an agenda which is censoring pro-Palestine speech. They want that, and they're explicit about that in that part I quoted. The organization which organized the Hanukkah event is Chabad, and I'm not, obviously, like, nothing justifies the massacre of these people.
Definitely.
But, like, the fact that they're now using their victimhood as a way of attacking the left and pro-Palestine speech and so on, we have to actually understand who these people are. Like, Chabad movement is aligned with Ben Gvir, who's it's the most far right party of Israel. It's called Jewish Power, which tells you a lot, I think. You change the word Jewish for white or any other, like, this is a racist party in a colonial situation. It was founded by the people who ran an earlier party, a Kahanist party, which was banned for being too terroristic. They'd carried out a bunch of terrorist attacks, including on the sort of center left of Israel. So the Israeli state, which is a racist, violent state, thought these guys are too extreme.
Yeah.
So they created this new party, Jewish Power, to be like the legal face of their racism. And this is the party that Chabad is aligned with. And I didn't invent this. A writer for Shmarim, which is the Center for Media and Democracy in Israel, says that Chabad provides unwavering support for the concept of Greater Israel and rejection of any negotiations with the Arabs. Dr. Shuki Friedman, who's the Director General of the Jewish People Policy Institute, also of Israel, says Chabad always supported the most right-wing candidate possible. So this doesn't make the massacre legitimate, but it explains why some of the victims and sections of the pro-Israel community in Australia feel so on the front foot, because this was their agenda before Bondi, and Bondi gives them an excuse to carry it out with more aggression.
Yeah, and the aggression is really sort of significant, and no sort of section of society is immune from you're the cause of this, you've done this. So university campuses, they're too anti-Semitic, that's the fault. University students, problem. Probably Usman Khawaja is a problem because he wore, he wrote something about Palestine on his shoes at the cricket game. Who else is a problem? We're probably the problem because we say...
We're definitely the problem, yeah.
But then also the Labor Party is the problem too. So, and the Labor Party is the problem in many different sort of things. So, Albanese didn't implement the envoys plan quickly enough. They haven't done a royal commission. Why hasn't the task force existed yet? But then also in something that's sort of reminiscent of a political moment from 8 years ago now, there's an anti-Semitism problem in the Labor Party. And so the thing I'm referring to is the way that the right in the UK relentlessly attacked Jeremy Corbyn and the sort of people around him for an anti-Semitism problem. Again, wasn't an anti-Semitism problem. It was standing up for Palestine, for humanity, for justice. But yeah, now it's like there's a letter coming from the Labour's Israel Action Committee saying that there's too much anti-Semitism in the party, and referenced specifically Bob Carr because he was one of the people that went to the March for Humanity protest on the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Yeah, and these people in the Labor Party, they're not stupid. They know what happened to Corbyn. They saw what happened in the UK. So they're trying to get ahead of, I guess, that happening to people like them. And what they're doing is, saying we'll have a look at the plan or whatever. We'll invite, the president of the country that said there are no innocent people in Gaza over here. And yeah, I don't know what they're trying to achieve by that other than, save their own political careers.
Well, they want to neutralize the attacks, right?
Yeah.
But
also it's just there's a really hard right section of the Labor Party that have always been virulently supportive of the state of Israel. So Daniel Andrews, former Premier of Victoria, he is, from the socialist left of the Labor Party, but also from the most pro-Israel section of the Labor Party as well. He went to a whole bunch of fundraisers for Zionist organizations and stuff like that. So I think, there's an element of it that obviously, for Albanese inviting the Israeli PM, that's about sort of manufacturing an image of, we want to bring everybody together. Look, I am doing something, whatever. But I think for the people in the Labor Party who wrote this letter, it's like they're also seeing a moment to push back against, the recognition of the Palestinian state and try and actually continue to push the kind of pro-Israel message inside Labor.
Yeah, and then the people who got him elected are coming out to bat against socialists in their trade unions. I'm talking about Luke Hilakari in The Australian.
Yeah, so what was that article?
So I guess I don't even remember what the article was about. It was just about Bondi, like Luke Hilakari and another right-wing trade unionist was interviewed about Bondi or wrote something. I don't know whether they offered that up to The Australian or whatever. And they used the opportunity after the Bondi massacre, I guess, to talk about how trade unionists for Palestine is a terrible thing that Victorian Socialists has done, and why, we should all stop doing that. This is a guy that got Daniel Andrews elected. This is a guy...
Got his brother elected.
Totally. This is a guy also that, has done absolutely nothing for Palestine as the leader of the Victorian Union movement. And then when, the one time that he did, after being dragged kicking and screaming to do something, which was just endorse a rally and maybe speak at it, he was heckled. And then ever since then, he's been like, these people are fucking evil because they were mean to me.
That was your fault, Omar.
I personally was not doing the heckling, but I definitely understood why the heckling was taking place. I mean,
Totally.
Omar was, for context, Omar was one of the MCs of the rally that Luke Hilakari spoke at. And the Palestinian co-chair with Omar, she, in introducing...
No, it was after he spoke.
Oh, after he spoke, sort of just said, well, thanks, Luke, for speaking, but the union movement hasn't really done enough at this point in time.
We want to see action.
Yeah.
It's words are nice, but we need to see action.
Yeah, and then after that, he just...
He's like, that's enough.
He literally told, we got word from people in Trades Hall that because of that, he was never going to speak at another Palestine rally again, and they were never going to endorse one. So it's talk about thin skin,
You're going to abandon cause for justice because somebody asked you to take some action on it.
Exactly. Yeah, and Yaz wrote something really good about it. It was was like, some people's response to this will be that, we do need to be nice to these people, otherwise they won't do anything. But literally the only reason that he even came to that fucking rally was because we'd been hounding him for 2 years.
Yeah, the power of the mass movement. But again, this is another example. The mass movement had it, we were on the front foot, and then this Bondi thing happens, which has nothing to do with us. ISIS doesn't support Palestine, but they do hate Jews. And so they carry out this atrocity, and then but no one really cares about them. They really care about us, right? And so then all these union leaders who've been criticized by the left, Labor Party MPs and so on, they all see this as a chance to kind of bite back and not fight against the right that are baying for blood, but actually fight against those who are standing up against blood for peace, for liberation, for the Palestinian people. But I think it's important, the point Annika's making about the right in the Labor Party, not so much factional right, because the irony is the faction that's been the most prepared to speak up for Palestine is actually the New South Wales right. Which is where Bob Park's part of, and Ed Husick and stuff. Because they're based in Western Sydney.
Where
and so these cynical
yeah.
bastards, they couldn't give a shit about
They
Palestine.
just need to get voted in.
They need the votes. And so they're saying, this is ridiculous. We're saying things that are hurting us in our core constituents. So they're under attack. And so I think it is significant what happened to Corbyn. Corbyn went along with it, apologized for being an anti-Semite, apologized for having allies who were anti-Semitic, expelled a bunch of socialists, including socialist Jews, from the Labor Party for being anti-Semitic, so-called. That didn't help him. You know, surprise,
you
surprise,
believe?
with the Murdoch press or the right-wing press. They didn't say, oh, thank you, Jeremy, you've done a good job. Now we can all go back to discussing economic policy. No, they just kept attacking. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see whether the Labor Party people here hold their ground. Not that they're particularly amazing. Like,
No.
not one of these Labor MPs has ever voted against the
crossed
parties
the floor,
or crossed
yeah.
the floor or done anything. They speak in private.
Yeah.
Or
And
Ed spoke up after he'd been kicked out of the inner
That's right.
circle.
Totally, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But even
Like,
then,
well, if I'm going to be a backbencher, fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
but still never crossed the floor.
yeah.
That's right.
But yeah,
So-
said something nice one time.
Yeah.
So these battles are going on, but I think it's yet to be seen how it plays out in full. Albanese clearly has taken a different stance to Minns, right? Minns is just like, I'm with Israel all the way, and he always has been. Albanese's trying to balance, but he's on the back foot. And so the invitation to Herzog is so important to resist and to oppose. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But the fact he's done that, I think, is a really significant step, because he hasn't actually had leading Israeli figures in Australia for some time. And this is a big move and will be very controversial.
I mean, it's a huge provocation as well.
Yeah.
And I think that should be resisted. But you can imagine the hysteria that's going to exist when the date is announced when he's coming. The hysteria that's going to exist around people daring to protest against him. It's like they've basically set up the whole situation to just be like this tinderbox, so that they can, take advantage of the moment once again. But yeah, it's like this is the guy that is, named alongside Netanyahu in the accusations of war crimes.
It's not an accusation of genocide. The UN has said it fits the definition of genocide.
Yeah.
They found that in September.
So, I know what we'll do. We'll invite a genocidal, actor to Australia.
To show that we really take anti-Semitism seriously.
Yeah.
So and this is the thing, every single person who sees this response and then sees the government invite an Israeli president who's literally in the dock, or should be in the dock, for genocide and war crimes, it just creates confusion, right? Like, why is this happening? Who's to blame? And we're going to talk all about this. But first, let's hear from Amy.
Riding out the party line.
Well, hey, Amy. Thank you for coming on to our podcast. We really appreciate it. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here. My name's Amy Remeikis. I'm currently the Chief Political Analyst at the Australia Institute and contributing editor at the New Daily. I've been a journalist for probably over 20 years now, pushing that, most of it in politics. I've worked for Fairfax/Nine newspapers, The Guardian, and regionals and all the rest of it, and more recently kind of went into this murky fifth estate area that's sort of emerging, I suppose, because of some of the failures in legacy media. And that doesn't mean that all legacy media is terrible, like not all boomers, but there does seem to be stories and perspectives that aren't necessarily getting the airing that they need to. And it can be hard no matter where you are to do that. So I sort of took the leap to sort of see what I could do in terms of political journalism and analysis and commentary in that fifth estate area. And it's difficult, and scary at times, but it does allow you to, I suppose, be a little bit more intellectually honest. And one of the big criticisms that I get, from all sides, so I'm still a member of the press gallery. I still do political journalism and analysis and commentary. I'm just doing it, I suppose, in a space that is not entirely out of the mainstream. The New Daily is a small publication, but it's still mainstream. And I write for Crikey, and I write for, probably more emerging fifth estate outlets like Deep Cut and others like that. One of the main criticisms I get, though, is that, oh, well, you're biased. And to which I say, well, we're all fucking biased.
Not the Australian.
I know, right? Like, whoa, God forbid the Australian have like a bias editorial line.
What a crazy criticism.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, you can never actually be biased on the left. Of course we're all fucking biased. Like this idea that journalists enter into a newsroom and then every single life experience they've ever had and every thought leaves their body, and they're just these pure being just open to whatever the objective opinion is.
It's like the Age with their byline, like independent always. But it's like, they just carry all of the attacks on anything progressive or left wing that happens, carry all the articles saying that protests should be in Treasury Gardens and never allowed on the street. And
exactly. Like we all enter into bias. At least I'm intellectually honest about it. Like, exactly my position on all things. It's just I also come with the facts and the receipts to back up, the vibes that I have about the way things should be. So it's been an interesting half step, I suppose, but I think a necessary one. Not what I'm doing, but just what we're seeing emerge in new media, I think has been exceptionally necessary in the Australian space.
So when you were working for some of those like legacy media outlets, were there things that you felt like you were unable to say, unable to report on, unable to argue? Like what were some of the restrictions that were carried in that space?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer because no one ever says to you, no, you can't. Certainly where I was working, no one was saying no, that you can't. It just that at times it would become so difficult to get something up that you were bracing yourself for the mental and emotional labor in order to get through something through the editors. And it wasn't even necessarily that they were against it either. It's just that they were like, well, we know what's going to happen if this is not bulletproof. And so of course you should be bulletproof. Everything that you put into a newspaper should be able to stand up to scrutiny. But it just seemed to be always on one side having to stand up to scrutiny.
So it ends up being like a self-censoring sort of process.
And you just start to feel, I think, that it's just you start to know yourself, the lines that you're going to need to put into things and what is going to pass muster and what isn't. And so everyone, I think, ends up self-censoring because you're just like, oh God, what's going to happen here? And I think for media, and this is not a comment on any of my previous employers, it's just a general view of media. Media is so scared about being policed by other media and the role that the Australian plays in that. Like it has an outsized cultural presence. I think in terms of, its audience numbers are quite low. The way that it influences, the common person on the street is probably nowhere near as much as it is in big, scary media land. Yeah. But if the Australian or the News Corp machine is going to make an example out of you, it makes it very difficult for you to do your job. And so then there was also a level of protection, I think, like people being like, oh no, we can't let them go out and say this because then they're going to become a target and that's going to make their life absolute shit. And it does. I've been the target, multiple times of News Corp, and it does make your life harder and it does make it shit. And you're suddenly having to justify stuff where you're just like, well, that's only half the story. Also, why do I matter? I'm just a fucking lowly journalist. No one gives a shit about me. No one knows who I am. But it's all of those sort of elements that come into play. So it's not even necessarily like that there's this big, scary, dark, influence over media where they're saying you can't report on this and you can't report on that. And there's these shadowy figures saying what a story is and what isn't. I think we all just become a little bit scared of what could happen and whether or not you have the energy to go through that and defend it while continuing to report. And that has a massive censoring impact on media as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the Australian, one of the things that we talked about earlier in the episode was the Australian just carrying these just disgusting fascistic pieces in the wake of the Bondi massacre. I guess how would you characterise the media response to what happened in Sydney and the sort of arguments that they've been putting out?
I think it's a lot of the shock doctrine in practice. And so for listeners who don't know what the shock doctrine is, it started with like the grandfather of neoliberal economics, Milton Friedman, who basically came up with this idea that in times of crisis, either real or manufactured, the ideas that are picked up politically are the ideas that are left lying around. And Milton Friedman's whole shtick was we need to have our ideas kept alive, you know, politically and within the consciousness. So whenever there is a massive like shock, they're going to go to our ideas. And then it was Naomi Klein who wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, where she explored how that's been put into practice, a lot in terms of like the governments of South America and things like that, where real or manufactured crises allowed American interests to step in and basically do what they wanted to do in South America. And she's written a lot about how that plays out across political crises across the world. And when we saw the horrendous happenings at Bondi, even before anybody knew what had happened, we had media commentators, mostly from Sky News, out there on the streets immediately labeling it as it turned out correctly to be, a terror attack, but then immediately blaming the government for not doing enough on anti-Semitism, and then immediately blaming anyone who's ever partaken in a Palestinian protest. And the immediate blanket coverage from that end of the media was the government has not done anything on anti-Semitism, which is not true. It's demonstrably not true. And we can get into the weeds about the New South Wales police response and who dropped the ball in terms of security and, you know, what was done and what wasn't done. You know, of course, you can always have that discussion. But then it was immediately like, by allowing, inverted commas, democratic protests to go ahead, protesting a genocide completely separate to the issue of anti-Semitism, that has created the environment for this horrendous anti-Semitic attack to occur. That became like basically the foundation of much of the media coverage. And you could see, I think, the shock in people's faces at seeing those issues conflated, because yes, I mean, it was a horrendous anti-Semitic attack carried out by deranged terrorists, but that has nothing to do with people who were marching across the Sydney Harbour Bridge demanding an end to a genocide. It has nothing to do with criticism of Israel and its current practices. You know, it's completely separate, but there was no room for nuance in that. And then the moment that the federal coalition saw a chance for its own political unity around this issue, it gave it legs. And so for the first few days, all we heard was the federal government has blood on its hands, and anyone who has ever advocated for Palestine has contributed to this horrendous attack. And it, frankly, neither are true.
Yeah, I mean, Susan Ley literally said in one of her speeches, I think at the funeral, first they came for the Harbour Bridge, then they came for Bondi, and we will not let them take that step. You know, like it's actually chilling. And I think you made the point in your article, this is quite unusual. And I know, like, living through 9/11 and that whole era, there tended to be this kind of, you know, which had its own problems, this idea of national unity, everyone's coming together to get the baddies on the other side of the world, you know, all that kind of rhetoric. But it was much more like that side of response, whereas this has been very much a far-right response trying to blame the government, migrants, Muslims, in an extremely politicized manner. And a lot of people have argued that politicizing things is somehow the problem, which I don't think it is. Everything is political, right? But it's sort of the way in which the tragedy has been weaponized by the far right. And the Liberal Party these days, honestly, it can be characterized as part of the far right, has been quite notable. And the media is really one part of that. But they've been egged on, you know, by the coalition, by Hanson, Bob Katter, people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I checked with Australian political historians. So it wasn't just, you know, me going, this doesn't seem right. I looked up, you know, the responses in modern political history to these big nation shaking events to see whether there'd actually ever been a split in, political unity on the issue, and there hadn't been. And then I went to the extra step of checking with historians and being like, has this ever happened before? And they were like, no, this has not happened in modern Australian history. I think early in World War II, there was like a little bit of like, oh, we are on different pages about how to handle Hitler. But in terms of when we went to war, Australia was united. So every single event that we have had, and most of them have been, terrorism based. So you can go to the Bali bombings, you can go to the Christchurch massacre, which of course was Australian in origin. You can have a look at the Lint Cafe siege, even to the Cronulla race riots, where Kim Beazley, who was a Labor opposition leader at the time, refused to talk about race, which was obviously a key part of those race riots, and that's just not us saying that. That's historically where it landed, because, and talking to people around, Labor at the time, they didn't want to make political disunity one of the issues as they were trying to bring the country together. They were like, look, rightly or wrongly, the idea was we're not going to have a political fight about this when the country was so fractured around race. We could deal with that later. First, we had to unite around the fact that this was terrible. So this is the first time we have seen an Australian opposition so blatantly play the politics on something by going, this is the government's fault. The government has blood on its hands, which is just, for people who have argued, during the Black Friday bushfires, the Black Summer bushfires, where people were saying like, this was Scott Morrison's fault. The difference in these cases is Scott Morrison lied about where he was and like why he was gone. The coalition had a demonstrable history of not doing anything on climate action, and in fact just telling people that it wasn't an issue at all, and also had a history of saying, well, we don't need to deal with this is off into the future. Ever since October 7, what we've seen from the Labor government is a response that has been taking anti-Semitism seriously. There has been money, there has been funding. It's exceptionally difficult for anyone to raise issues of Islamophobia. There have been crackdowns on protests. There have been crackdowns on freedom of speech. We've seen academics, just public figures who have been had either grants taken away, have lost jobs, have lost work because they have been advocating on behalf of Palestine. So you can't say that the government swung in behind Palestinian protesters, and was just like, we're going to uphold all of their rights to freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. That's not what happened. In fact, I would say that most people would say that the federal government has been quite sympathetic to those who have been arguing on behalf of Israel's actions.
And arming Israel directly.
Yes, and arming as well, as you say. And the only time that we saw the government actually respond to people's concerns about the genocide is after we saw the Sydney Harbour Bridge March, which was about 300,000 people conservatively in the rain walking, saying we are against a genocide. And after that, you saw the federal government respond by saying we're going to recognise Palestine, which is something that most of the rest of the world has done. Australia was an outlier in not recognising Palestine. And then you saw Australia, before that, start to move from abstaining in votes at the UN to actually voting with those major allies like the UK and Canada and Japan in saying we want the genocide to stop. So it was the will of the people against a very big political bloc. So you can't say that the government has not acted on anti-Semitism. Have they done enough? That is, on any hate-based issues in Australia. That, of course, is up to debate. Were mistakes made? That, of course, is also up to debate. Have people used the Palestinian cause to further their own far-right anti-Semitic issues? Of course that has happened. Just as people have used advocating for Israel to further their own Islamophobic views and issues. This is something that Australia has to reckon with, and we have been terrible at reckoning with any sort of hate-based crimes in Australia. One, because we mostly have politicians who keep telling us that hate-based issues aren't an issue in Australia and we don't really need to think about it. And two, because we're really uncomfortable with dealing with our own organically grown hate-based issues of racism towards Indigenous people. And if we recognise that, then we'd have to recognise everything. And that doesn't seem to be at a place that Australian society is at right now. But the response to this from far-right figures, from the far-right media, from far-right elements in our political system has been basically to say the only thing to blame for these two crazy, deranged terrorists picking up guns and going and targeting a Jewish event at Bondi Beach is because the government did not crack down on Palestinian protests.
Or because they recognized Palestine in the UN, which, by the way, ISIS does not support Palestinian statehood or independent existence. Like, it's the most ludicrous argument. But,
it is. So and there's no evidence to see that either of these men ever stepped foot on a university. Cracking down on universities isn't going to do anything. There's no evidence that changing the definition to include criticism of Israel as being anti-Semitic would have prevented or made anybody safer. There's no evidence that they were part of the Palestinian movement at all.
That's right.
But none of that has mattered in the aftermath of this attack, because we loved to find heroes and villains, and finding a villain here that is easy to blame, easy to point fingers at, has united the right in Australia in a way that they haven't been united for years, and they're almost feverish with that unity and feeling like everything's going to be fine because they've found a cause that they can wrap themselves around. And now they're doing absolutely everything that they can to push that line, which is not benefiting the Jewish community. It is not making anybody safer. It's not doing anything to address anti-Semitism, let alone unite Australia around the cause of getting rid of all hate-based issues in Australia. It's not doing any of that.
And I think that point that you've made just then about how this is not making Jewish people safer this is an argument that Anthony Lowenstein has also been making. He wrote a really excellent article this week about how Israel is actually making it an unsafer place across the world for Jewish people because of the way that they actually try and, not just try, but actively make the argument that Israel, Jewishness, Zionism are one in the same, and what's happening in Gaza is a reflection, according to Israel, of what Jewish people want and think should happen. This is actually fueling an anti-Semitic sort of politic that some people can take up. But I think it has been important that there's been a critical response from people like yourself, Anthony Lowenstein, other journalists, because, as you've said, the media is just the right-wing media, including the Age and the like, the ABC, have taken this opportunity to just push the argument completely to the right. And as you've said, and as we've talked about on the pod, the cracking down on civil liberties and those spaces. But I think the other thing, because you mentioned Kim Beazley's lack of response around race to the Cronulla riot scene, I think the fact that, and you make the point in the article, that it's most of these tragedies, the Labor Party have been the one in opposition. This is because the Labor Party support all of these things. They don't want to make an issue of, there is a racism problem. Like you said, they don't want to confront it. So the Labor Party, it's not that they just really care about unity and want to keep the peace. It's that they want to help, further a rightward political shift in our society,
or at least maintain the lowest common denominator. We don't disagree, Muslims, we don't want to talk about that, we don't want to defend them, so always refugees, dodging the issue, constant triangulation. And so you see the right don't have that compunction, they don't feel the need to genuflect towards unity, multiculturalism, any of this kind of stuff. They're just like, nah, fuck it. We got to deal with the migrants. We got to deal with the Muslims. We got to crack down on the universities. But there isn't a left response that's as confident, but actually accurately and correct, and anti-racist.
Yeah, I mean, civility politics only ever flows one way.
Yeah.
And that generally tends to be what, conservatives or the far right say is civility politics, and any sort of like pushback against what they're doing tends to be seen as outrageous or shocking or disunity or, un-Australian, as John Howard made an entire personality type out of. And that does, I think, scare people into not saying things, which is why it has been so important that we've had groups like the Jewish Council of Australia emerge to say that this does not stand for what we stand for. We do not agree with what Israel is doing. We are not a monolith where every single Jewish person has exactly the same view on this. Please stop prescribing all of your views onto us and saying all Jewish people, because we disagree. It's been very important to have people like Sarah Schwartz out there taking a lot of the right-wing heat, because like she's not saying what they want people to say, and two, because she's also a Jewish woman, which, makes her more of a target than some of the Jewish men who are speaking up, something that they also acknowledge. So, it's been really, really important that she keeps getting up and keeps saying this is not how we feel about things as a collective. There are disagreements within the Jewish community, and we Jewish people want to see what a free Palestine. We want to see equal rights applied. We want to see Jewish people treated with nuance and respect, and not just have the Australian tell us what a Jewish view is on this, not just have Sky News and Shari Markson speaking for all Jewish Australians. This is not what we want. And I think that has been a surprise to some in the establishment, that there have been people who've gone, you know what, enough. Like, we are sick of having other people speak as if we are completely in agreement on all of this, because we see it in Indigenous groups as well. Like, Australians love to just say this one Indigenous person has said something I agree with, so therefore all Indigenous people agree with what I'm saying. We love to do it. Like, this one woman has said this one thing that I agree with, so she now speaks for all women in Australia, especially on the right. So having voices push back against those narratives and say, no, that's not right, and to keep doing it despite the personal cost, which I don't think, I'm fairly protected. I am a white middle-class woman who's got 20 years of career behind her. I, have, of course, faced controversies, and it's pretty shit when you're the target, but I've got pretty strong support systems, by identity and also longevity. We're seeing people who are stepping into this world from law degrees and, just from working in a university where they're doing their research on something completely unrelated, but just going, oh no, I need to say something here because this is impacting all of these people around me and I can't stand for it, who are now being thrown into this wolf's den for the first time and having their livelihoods questioned, their family relationships questioned, their friendships, their community, everything questioned. They're being treated so differently within their own communities as well as by the wider community, and they keep getting up and speaking up for what they believe is right. And I'm not sure they get enough support or I think acknowledgement for that. So, if you can support these people who are taking a much bigger risk than I am, coming out and speaking on behalf of Palestine, because it's a lot easier in a lot of ways for me to do it. than it is for somebody who either is from like an Arab background or, you know, a Muslim background or a Jewish background to push against the tide and continue to stand up and speak, because all of these elements that we talk about on this podcast come and center on them for daring to step out the lines in a way that they expect us to step out the lines. They're like, oh, you lefties, of course that's what you're going to be saying. But, you know, if you're a marginalized group and you're pushing against the tide, you know, just look out. So support those people in any way you can.
Totally.
Well, thanks so much for being one of those voices that does, you know, dare to say something different and not just sort of follow on with the right-wing tide that's pushed in nearly every avenue of our lives. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast. People can follow your work at online, Deep Cut, New Daily. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you guys do as well. The more voices in this space, the better.
Riding out the party line.
Well, it was great to hear from Amy sort of giving some of that broader context about the media landscape and the ways that people are trying to push back against it. It was useful that that Amy mentioned Sarah Schwartz, who is a quite amazing, you know, activist, writer, and lawyer. You don't really, like, you know, you don't always think about lawyers as like cool people, but
Not
she's pretty
usually.
cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Amy's with the Human Rights Law Center. Is she actually? She is a lawyer as well.
Sarah?
Sarah. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah.
Anyways, the Human Rights Law Centre, they've been doing a lot of sort of pushback against some of the civil liberties crackdowns that have existed. Like in Victoria, sort of separately to the Bondi stuff, the Victorian government has introduced the designated zones thing. And so it was like 6 months that the entire Melbourne CBD is going to be under a designated zone, which means the police can just stop and search whoever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
I was in High Point the other day doing Christmas shopping, and there's just cops walking around with big fuck off guns in High Point in the shopping centre.
Insane.
Anyways,
Always that safe feeling.
Sarah Schwartz and the Human Rights Law Centre have actually teamed up with some Indigenous organisations and climate activists to put forward a challenge to that. But yeah, I mean, like, there's going to need to be more and more challenges like this, because the space for democratic freedoms just continues to get narrower and narrower and narrower. And it's kind of like Australia is often, we're a cultural, political backwater, late to the game on things. I'm sure skinny jeans came back in America like 6 months ago, but they're only just coming here now. But I think there are other countries that are ahead of us in terms of some of the
repression.
Like the repression, and one of those places is in the United Kingdom, where obviously the Palestine Action Group has been prescribed as a terrorist organisation. It just boggles the mind. But I was reading
because they spray painted some stuff in a RAF base.
Yeah.
Like spray painting is now equivalent to terrorism.
Well, and it turns out also writing things online is also equivalent to terrorism. So I was reading this article in the Middle East Monitor by Tony Greenstein, and he is going to be in court in January. He's been charged with an offence under the Terrorism Act, and there's a penalty for it of 14 years, maximum penalty if he's found guilty for it. And the thing that he did, which was terrorism, was writing on Twitter that he supported Palestinian resistance against the Israeli Defense Forces.
Just in general.
Yeah.
Not even Palestine Action Group or
No,
anything.
just support Palestinian resistance against the IDF.
Wow.
So you can't even say that you support like people resisting being genocided without the UK police coming down and getting you.
The only position is to support the Israeli tank.
Yeah.
And the Israeli missiles and the Israeli F-35s.
And the thing that he talks about is how they seized his computer, laptop and mobile phone. And when he put in an application to get back his phone and his computer, they said that they needed to keep it because they provided a highly relevant insight into his mind.
Oh my God.
So
This is like 1984
Yeah,
shit. That's
legit.
wild.
I mean, the Palestine Action thing, like, the main victims of that have been all these like old grannies and grandpas.
Totally. Yeah.
Rightly using their sort of identity and status, I guess, in society as like a tool to expose the hypocrisy and ludicrousness of this thing. Because, you know, clearly this isn't what the government envisaged. It was arresting all these old white people.
Yeah.
They wanted to just crack down on the sort of direct action anarcho-types. But by doing this, they're actually bringing a lot of attention, and rightly so, to this to the ludicrousness of this thing.
Yeah, it shows how absolutely ridiculous. Like when you arrest blind people holding up a sign, grannies, like children for posting on Twitter, like police coming to their home, like raiding them. Like it does show that it's insane.
Because all the signs say is, I support Palestine Action Group.
Yeah.
Just Palestine Action.
Yes, Palestine
Action.
Action. Yeah, we've got the.
I've been
we've
Sydney
saying it
brain.
Group
online.
is Sydney, yeah.
Definitely.
Palestine Action is the UK.
Yeah.
That's right. And so now they're in a situation where they have like thousands, it must be over 2,000 or something like that now, people in remand, just who are being held on these, because you can't bail someone on a terrorism charge, obviously, right? So these people are being
that
held.
would show it's ridiculous.
Yeah, like they're being held, they're like, and the court system is getting clogged. And so now it's like, we need to abolish jury trials, which was like a democratic revolution in legal process from centuries ago. Like before that, it was like the lord of the manor would just pass down decrees on the peasants. And then it was like, hold on, maybe like the peers should have a say in what a crime is and isn't. And so this was the democratic idea of a jury trial. And they're just abolishing it because they say, oh, there's too many. But I think the real reason is they know that not a single jury in the world would convict people passively standing, opposing a war, holding up a sign of terrorism. I think they know that.
There's also like juries can change laws. It's called like juror abolition or something like that, which is where if you prove that the crime has occurred and the jury doesn't convict you, that's a precedent, which is like, okay, this law is stupid. Like if you proved every single point.
Yeah.
So that's like, it's probably not the reason that they're doing it. It's more like, oh, we just have too many people. It's costing too much money to do all this kind of stuff. But it is probably one of the concerns.
Yeah, and like some shithead judge can convince himself of anything, you know? Whereas like an average citizen confronted with these facts, I think there's just zero chance they would be convicted. So you're seeing like the Palestine movement and the desire to repress it be like the cutting edge of authoritarian policy making all around the world.
And now some young people might die because of it. So some of the original group that did the graffitiing at the army base have been held in prison, I think for over a year now. And they are on hunger strike. One of them is just basically close to death, and the British government do not care. They actually have blocked the prison blocked an ambulance from coming in to take one of the hunger strikers for, I think it was like 8 hours or something like that. Maybe someone can correct me. So the ambulance is just waiting there. There's a big protest out the front of the prison being like, literally their demand was let the ambulance in. I mean, the British government have form in letting people die who are on hunger strike. The Irish, activist Bobby Sands died in prison, I think after 50 days on hunger strike.
In the 80s, yeah.
So
that was Thatcher, right?
Yeah.
This is a Labour government, yeah.
So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to these young people or the old people who will be facing court soon. But yeah, I think the prescribing of organisations, activist organisations as terrorist organisations is just, it leads us in a pretty scary path. And I mean, where we are in Australia right now is also pretty
Totally. Yeah.
bad.
Like we can see where it's going, but it's not like we're not heading there already. They're just a little bit quicker than us.
Yeah, so I mean, in New South Wales, Chris Minns has introduced legislation where they have now they're able to ban protests for up to 3 months after a terrorist incident.
And the cops have already started to use that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the Invasion Day protest in January. They've said that they can gather in the park but not march.
And then they've also banned the phrase globalize the intifada, which I think you said earlier. And the argument here is that intifada means violence and mass murder of Jews or whatever. But intifada is just an Arabic word for uprising or revolution. As people have pointed out, like in Arabic histories, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of Jews against the Nazis is called the Warsaw Intifada. And intifada just means uprising, revolution. The Arab Spring in Arabic in many places was referred to as an intifada. Rebellions about poverty, bread rights, and so on have been called intifadas. So, you know, it's just partly it's racism. It's like there's an Arabic word. It's inherently scary, you know, whatever. But then it's also just, again, the idea that resistance is not acceptable. You have to, if you're Palestinian or you're a supporter of the Palestinian, the only policy is love Israel. You know, you have to not just like be passive. You have to like pledge your obedience and loyalty to Israel's colonial project in the Middle East. And unless you do that, you're like an enemy of the state. And that's where we're heading. And like the protest bans that were put on in Sydney that were defeated and ruled as unconstitutional, Minns is saying he wants to reintroduce those, change even more laws to make it constitutional, you know. So, and in Victoria now, Jacinta Allen has said she wants to introduce the same kind of laws as they have in Sydney. And so you can see always like civil rights, you only have as much rights as you fight for and use. And then the establishment, the ruling class, the bosses, the capitalists, their lackeys are always looking to take them away because they know that the more rights we have, the more capacity we have to resist.
And there's been an important challenge from some of the civil liberties groups in New South Wales to this, or they've said that they have the intention of taking this to the High Court. So Jewish organisations, the Palestine Action Group,
and the Black Caucus,
have come together to say that they're going to resist the moves to close that democratic space even further. So that's important.
Yeah, and like as socialists, we don't believe that, you know, the answers to all of our problems come from challenges in courts, successful challenges in courts. But it's important that we, you know, fight everywhere that we can, and that is one of the avenues that we can if it's available to us.
Totally. The other thing, like, because we talked with Amy and you mentioned Anthony Lowenstein's thing about the response to the Bondi attacks. Oh, no, sorry, the Israel's actions in Gaza and just generally in Palestine, and their deliberate conflation of that with all Jews makes Jews a potential victim, a target for anti-Semitic attacks. And I think that's absolutely right. The other thing that does that, and I kind of foreshadowed it earlier, is like the way in which the Bondi thing is being weaponized in such an insane way that defies all precedent and is sort of inexplicable unless you have a socialist analysis. That is actually leading to more anti-Semitism. Like people cannot understand why the government is going along with Israel and its supporters so openly and so aggressively. And I think we have to address this because the main conclusion a lot of people draw is that the Israel lobby or the Jewish lobby, which is sort of what they mean, even if they don't say it, is somehow behind it all. And I think that's a very dangerous argument because why is the Jewish lobby so capable of convincing governments to do their will? There's also a Muslim lobby. Why can't the Muslim lobby win or some other lobby, you know? So I think we have to reject this argument. It's like, yes, there is a pro-Israel lobby, but the reason they can get a hearing is because they're pushing with the wind, you know? They're going with the flow of what Australian foreign policy already is predisposed to do, right? So I think we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that there can be like an anti-Semitic idea that people form, that there's like, this secret cabal or something or other. But I think it's much better and less racist to understand this in terms of politics and imperialism. The Australian ruling class are supporters of the Western imperial project, and Israel is a very firm part of that. Israel has been described as, you know, the US's lapdog in the Middle East, or the police
Attack dog.
attack dog.
It's not a soft fuzzy thing. It's more of a
Or police force in the Middle East, maintaining Western interests in that region. Australia wants to be part and core to Western imperial alliances. See AUKUS, see the US-Australia alliance. And so keeping Israel close, pushing the idea that they are playing a positive role in society, pushing the idea that they are under attack and, their resistance is somehow justified, or calling it resistance to, the evil Arabs, et cetera, et cetera.
standing up for freedom.
This is an important political argument for the Australian ruling class, the media, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, everybody, to push. They want to win people to this argument, and so you have to make the Palestine movement seem as though they're demons that are being let out of the jug. Thanks, Chris Minns. But then also there's the secondary element of it, which is that it is useful for civil liberties, democratic rights to be undermined, because this is the only way that people have to push back against the interests of the ruling class that run counter to working class interests anyway. So they don't want people to be able to protest on the street. They don't want people to be able to go on strike. They don't want people to be able to criticize the government, because that gets in the way of the smooth running of the capitalist system. So on both sides of it, this is in the interests of the people who profit off of, who run the capitalist system. This isn't, secret ethnic lobbies. This is the interests of the capitalist system.
Totally, yeah. The Australian ruling class will do what is in its interest to do, and it is in its interest to do at this point in time, the things that the plan calls for, to clamp down on our democratic freedoms and rights and all of those things. It's not because, the Jewish lobby is so powerful or anything like that. It's because this is in the Australian ruling class's interests.
Yeah, like Rupert Murdoch, as far as I'm aware, is not Jewish. But he is like the most vociferous advocate for Israel in Australia. Gina Reinhart is not Jewish, but she's the same. Donald Trump is like a total anti-Semite, but loves Israel. Like the Republican Party is now stuffed full of these literal far-right freaks, anti-Semites, racists, whatever. And most of them love Israel. And so there's no correlation. Like George Bush was famously a member of an anti-Semitic society in college, but then he loves Israel. Israel is a useful foreign policy outlet, for the West, as Annika said. And so that's important to understand, because it's why anti-Semitism is actually a problem. Because it is sort of, it's one of the oldest racisms. It's sort of built into the far right in a kind of deep structural way. Even if in a social sense, Jews are not like an oppressed minority as a whole, in politics, Jews as a minority are a really important tool to be used to stoke racism, to distract from the real issues. Anti-capitalists say capitalism's a problem. The far right say the Jews are the problem. It's like a useful kind of populist, sort of pseudo-populist argument. So that's why anti-Semitism persists all the way through, even though the position of Jews has changed very fundamentally from 150 years ago to where it is today in terms of demographics and sociology and all that. So it's a really important thing to confront. And the fact that sections of kind of, I wouldn't say the left, but like new people who are newly politicizing, angry about the genocide, we have to combat in that kind of cohort the idea that this is just about a simple issue of like a couple of Jewish organizations in Australia that's leading to this. Because that isn't an anti-capitalist argument.
Yeah, it's sort of like why language like Zios and stuff like that is just so not useful. It's like we actually need to be clear about what we're arguing, and sort of what the sort of political target is, and be clear that make it so we're unable to be characterized as such. I think as anti-Semitic, I think that's really important. And yeah, it can seem counterintuitive, the thing about, anti-Semitism is so important to the right. Israel is so important to the right. But I think the way that Omar's described it can sort of see that it's not sort of just counterintuitive, that things actually go hand in hand. Israel is an important tool for foreign policy. Anti-Semitism is an important tool for stoking division. The ruling class, the capitalist class, they look for different ways to further their political interests, and these are some of just the ways that they do it. So, we stand for justice. We stand against genocide. We support Palestinian liberation. We support liberation from the river to the sea. This does not mean the annihilation of Jewish people. This means that people having, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever, having the rights to live in freedom, in peace, and have access to the same rights, which currently they do not have access to the same rights. And so being clear about what we're against and what we're for, I think is really, really important.
And it's actually a much more radical argument. Like people who think that, it's like the only issue is just this small groups of Jews who somehow manipulate governments. Like what you're actually saying is capitalism is sort of okay and could tolerate Palestinian liberation if it wasn't for these small Jewish groups. Whereas the socialist argument is much more fundamental, that imperialism leads to oppression of people all around the world. In Palestine, yes, in Kashmir, there's a number of places. So the problem is fundamental. So it's actually a much more radical argument. But it also requires some historical understanding, some theoretical understanding, which is why like the sort of online trap of like just comments about Zios and, the lobby, And there was an interesting article, I can't remember where I read it now, but it was talking about how, this is a dangerous game because people are sort of, the right wing say you're anti-Semites, and then this sort of like newly politicized cohort say, well, Israel says it's Jewish. Well, we kind of agree. And it's like, it's toxic. We don't want to accept their narratives.
Totally.
It's their narrative. Our argument is imperialism is to blame and capitalism is to blame. And actually there are plenty of Jewish people, workers all around the world who are on the side of liberation. And that's something that the left wants to highlight.
Yeah,
exactly. Like when your argument is the exact same argument that the NSN was holding on their flag outside the New South Wales Parliament House, it's probably not correct.
We've gone wrong somewhere.
Yeah, you took a wrong turn.
Exactly.
So let's talk about our response, because there are some things. So you talked already about the civil liberties kind of case in Sydney, which is really important.
Yeah.
The other thing that I can let our listeners in on, I think it'll be announced by the time this goes up, is the Palestine movement has come together first in a meeting last week and then one on Monday night in Melbourne to say that we need to respond to firstly the visit of Herzog, who's the president of Israel, absolute scumbag, genocidal, far-right, appalling figure. He's been invited by Albanese. We don't know when he's going to come, but we've called a protest for Jan the 11th to respond to that, to oppose that. But also in the themes of the demo, the fact that the genocide continues. More than 400 people have been killed since the so-called ceasefire. I mean, that's like, what? How many people is that a day? Like so many people have been killed and they call it a ceasefire. If this many Israelis had died, it would not be considered a ceasefire. No. The Israeli government has just approved 19 new settlements in the West Bank, mostly in areas that are nominally, according to Oslo, the two-state solution thing, meant to be Palestinian territory. So they're expanding aggressively in the West Bank. There's talk about never giving back the half of Gaza they currently occupy. So the things are terrible in Palestine. We want to recenter that and say that we should not be supporting genocide and we should not be inviting war criminals to this country. So that's Sunday, the 11th of January. There's going to be a movement-wide meeting to talk about promotion. Everyone who's listening, do your best to help. There'll be posters and material at the VS Bookshop where we're recording this podcast. There'll be stuff out there in the community. There'll be social media you can do. Like, we need thousands of people on the street to stand up for our rights in a context where they're under attack left, right and center. And more than just our rights, the fundamental narrative that Palestine is the victim and that Palestinians deserve justice, that is the thing under attack right now.
Yeah, I think it is important that we have a mass demonstration because that is what the government's trying to stop in many different ways in New South Wales, in Victoria, elsewhere. So we really encourage people to come out. And I think the point about recentering the fact that the genocide continues in Palestine is really, really important because the media class and the government have done everything they can to stop that from being discussed. And that was the intention of the ceasefire as well, was to bury the fact that it continues. And so coming out on the streets to stand with Palestine, to stand with humanity, justice is really, really key. Well, thanks so much for listening to the Party Line. You can email us and talk
You can.
You can.
If you want.
If there's things you want us to say, you can support us on Patreon. The link is in the notes, the show notes.
It really helps us. We're actually trying to upgrade a bit.
Yeah. We've had the same background for like 14 episodes or whatever it is now. So we're thinking
pretty gross.
we might want to update that, and our little red flags are starting to come untethered.
They're
from
wilting.
Deteriorate.
They're wilting in Melbourne's heat.
So if you'd like to see an upgraded backdrop,
Maybe some better pot plants.
Yeah.
this one's actually quite nice.
Yeah, this is a nice new one.
Yeah.
Better audio, some sound treatment.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
But yeah, so thanks for listening. Share this episode with your friends, and always be party lining. That's when you sign off.
Nice.
Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling party line. Oh, I never will forsake thee, for I love this life of mine.